Why do we crave things we know are wrong and feel guilt when we give in? This internal battle is not your imagination. Freud believed it was the structure of the mind itself. On this channel, we explore the groundbreaking theories of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, and how they still shape our understanding of the mind today. Welcome to Sigmund Freud Legacy, your destination for exploring the powerful and provocative theories of the father of psychoanalysis. In this three-part series, we unravel one of Freud's most influential psychological models, the id, the ego, and the superego. Freud believed the mind isn't a single unified entity. Instead, it's a system of conflicting forces, a space where desires, morals, and logic constantly interact. These inner dynamics shape our behaviors, thoughts, emotions, and daily decisions. Understanding this model doesn't just help us grasp human psychology, it helps us better understand ourselves. Let's begin with the first force in Freud's model, the id. The id is the oldest part of the human psyche. It's present from birth and exists entirely in the unconscious. It is driven by basic instincts and operates solely on the pleasure principle, the idea that we seek immediate gratification regardless of consequences. The id doesn't think, it doesn't reason, it only wants. If something feels good, the id pushes for it, now. According to Freud, the id is powered by two core drives: eros, the life instinct, our drive for love, intimacy, pleasure, and survival, and thanatos, the death instinct, the drive toward aggression, destruction, or self-harm. Picture a newborn baby. It cries when it's hungry, cold, or uncomfortable. It doesn't care about time or surroundings. It simply demands satisfaction. That's the id in its rawest form. As we grow, the id doesn't disappear. It lives on in our desires, dreams, fantasies, and impulses, the part of us that seeks pleasure no matter the rules. But we don't live by instinct alone. There's another force, one that says, "That's wrong," or "You should know better." That's the superego. The superego is the moral component of our psyche. It forms during early childhood as we absorb the values, rules, and expectations of parents, teachers, and society. The superego operates on the morality principle. It acts like an internal judge, constantly evaluating our thoughts and actions. It rewards us with pride when we do the right thing, and punishes us with guilt or shame when we don't. The superego has two key parts: the conscience, which stops us from doing things we've learned are wrong, and the ideal self, which pushes us toward perfection and high standards. Imagine your id saying, "Cheat on the test, no one will know." The superego replies, "That's dishonest, you know better than that." It invokes guilt, fear, or anxiety, not to harm us, but to keep us aligned with what we believe is right. A healthy superego helps us act with integrity, but an overactive superego can become harsh, creating constant self-criticism, anxiety, or unrealistic expectations. Now, caught between the instinctual id and the moral superego is the ego, the rational part of the mind that manages both. The ego is our conscious self. It operates on the reality principle, trying to satisfy the id's desires in ways that are socially acceptable and morally appropriate. The ego doesn't deny the id or the superego. Instead, it tries to balance them. Its job is to ask, how can I get what I want without breaking rules and still succeed in the real world? Let's say your id says, "Quit your job, you're miserable." Your superego says, "That would be irresponsible." Your ego might respond, "Let's plan an exit, find another job, and then resign." The ego is practical. It helps us think clearly, make decisions, solve problems, and interact with others. It delays gratification when necessary and considers long-term consequences. It's the part of us that says, let's be smart about this. When the ego functions well, it keeps both extremes in check. But if the ego is too weak, the person may become impulsive, driven by id, or overly rigid and anxious, driven by superego. These three forces, id, superego, and ego, are constantly interacting. They create the inner dialogue we experience every day. Think about something as simple as resisting a dessert while on a diet. The id says, eat the cake. The superego says, you promised yourself you wouldn't. The ego might say, maybe just a small piece, and I'll adjust my dinner. Or when dealing with someone who hurt you, the id says, scream at them. The superego says, stay composed, anger is destructive. The ego might say, express yourself firmly, but stay respectful. Freud saw this internal push and pull not as a weakness, but the essence of being human. For Freud, mental health is about balance. If the id dominates, we become reckless and self-indulgent. If the superego dominates, we become anxious and guilt-ridden. If the ego can't keep peace between the two, we experience internal conflict and psychological distress. To manage this pressure, the ego sometimes uses defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies to reduce anxiety. We'll explore those and modern responses to Freud's model in the next.
When we make decisions, resist temptations, or deal with stress, the id, ego, and superego are always active, pulling us in different directions. But how does this look in everyday life? Let's explore a few real-world situations where Freud's theory comes alive. Imagine you're on a strict diet. You've committed to healthy eating. Then someone places a slice of chocolate cake in front of you. The id says, eat it. It looks delicious. You deserve it. The superego says, you promised yourself you wouldn't. Be disciplined. The ego steps in and says, maybe just a small slice, and I'll exercise more tomorrow. This negotiation happens instantly in the mind, often without us realizing it. It's not just about cake. It's about how we handle all kinds of temptations, conflicts, and social situations. Now, let's say someone hurts you emotionally. Maybe they lied, betrayed, or disappointed you. The id wants to lash out, yell at them, hurt them back. The superego holds you back. Revenge is wrong. Be the bigger person. The ego finds the middle ground. I'll express how I feel, but I'll stay calm. These internal voices reflect Freud's structure in action. One voice pushing for raw emotion, another demanding moral restraint, and a third trying to maintain control and dignity. But what happens when the ego can't manage this pressure? According to Freud, when the conflict between the id and superego becomes too intense, the ego experiences anxiety. To cope, it uses defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies that help reduce stress, protect the mind, and avoid painful emotions. These defenses are not bad. In fact, they're normal and often necessary. But overused, they can distort our perception of reality and affect our mental health. Let's explore some of the key defense mechanisms Freud described. 1. Denial. This is when the mind refuses to accept reality. Example, a smoker who insists cigarettes aren't harmful. Denial protects us from uncomfortable truths, but it also keeps us stuck. 2. Repression. This involves burying painful thoughts deep in the unconscious. Example, forgetting a traumatic event from childhood. Repression is the mind's way of saying you're not ready to deal with this. 3. Projection. Here we attribute our own feelings to others, Example: someone who feels jealous accuses others of being jealous of them. It's easier to spot flaws in others than face them in ourselves. 4. Rationalization. This is when we create logical excuses for irrational behavior. Example: I didn't get the job because the interviewer didn't like me, rather than admitting lack of preparation. It helps preserve self-esteem even at the cost of honesty. 5. Displacement. This is redirecting emotion from a dangerous target to a safer one. Example: yelling at a friend after being scolded by your boss. It's like emotional rerouting, but the damage still spreads. 6. Sublimation. This is considered the healthiest defense. It's when unacceptable impulses are transformed into productive outlets. Example: a person with aggressive tendencies becomes a soldier or athlete. Here, the energy of the id is channeled through the ego into socially acceptable forms. Defense mechanisms help the ego survive. They soften emotional blows, delay discomfort, and give us time to process, but they don't solve the underlying conflict. Long-term mental health requires confronting, not avoiding what's happening inside. Over time, Freud's ideas have been refined, challenged, and expanded. Some psychologists believe his theories are too focused on unconscious conflict and sexual drives. Others argue his work lacks scientific evidence. But despite the criticisms, Freud's model remains influential. Modern psychology doesn't always use the terms id, ego, and superego, yet the core ideas persist. That we have impulses we struggle to control, that we internalize values from childhood, and that a healthy mind needs balance between desire and discipline. Even approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, and mindfulness echo Freud's insight. Our inner world shapes how we think, feel, and act, whether we're aware of it or not.
The human mind is not a silent space. It's a conversation, sometimes a debate between different forces within us. Freud's model invites us to recognize this. We are not just one voice, one thought, or one drive. We are a system, a dynamic relationship between what we want, what we should do, and what we can do. When we feel torn between a desire and a principle, when we struggle to understand why we overreact, when we judge ourselves too harshly or give in too easily, these are not random emotional storms. They are the echoes of the id, ego, and superego, each speaking their own truth. To live well, Freud suggested, we don't silence any part, we learn to listen. The id teaches us about passion. The superego teaches us about values. And the ego, it teaches us how to live with both, how to navigate reality with wisdom and grace. Mental strength doesn't mean never struggling. It means recognizing the struggle and learning to respond with awareness, not just reaction. This idea that awareness transforms us lies at the heart of all modern psychology, from therapy rooms to meditation spaces. Whether or not we agree with every part of Freud's theory, his model offers something powerful: a mirror. A way to look inward and understand what shapes our fears, our choices, our regrets, and our dreams. Where id was, there ego shall be, Sigmund Freud. A simple sentence, but a profound promise. That we can bring clarity where chaos once ruled. That we can bring self-awareness to places ruled by impulse. That we are not just driven, we can direct. If you found value in this journey through the mind, we invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and share it with anyone curious about the human mind. Thank you for watching. This is Sigmund Freud Legacy, where timeless theories meet the modern self. Until next time, stay curious, stay reflective, and take care.